Welcome to the Gridiron Unfiltered podcast, powered by Recon Sports, the show where we go behind the data and take a deep dive into the world of sports performance. I'm your host, Danny Davis, and today's guest, we have a man with over 2 decades of high school football coaching at Naples High School. He helped the Golden Eagles to 19 district titles, 2 state championships. He's a national board certified teacher, a Golden Apple recipient, and if you're on X, you probably know him as the Trench Doctor. Coach Paul Horn, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Danny. This is going to be a fun talk.
Absolutely. Coach, you spent over 2 decades coaching. So take us back to the beginning and what really pulled you into maybe the world of football, and then how did that lead you into the world of coaching?
Well, I fell in love with the game early in my life, and the physicality of it, the ability to go out and do things on the football field that you would be probably put in jail for if you were just walking down the street was something that appealed to me. Not that I'm want to be convict or anything, but I enjoyed the physical aspect of it. As I got down the road, and I was a pretty good football player coming up through school, and I realized that I probably had some potential to play into the future past high school. I started to understand there was an analysis to this, and my high school coach did a very good job of preparing scouting reports and prepping us and putting us in the right position to make the plays. And whereas as a young football player, I think you consider your strength, your speed, how big you are, all those things factor into being a good football player. And it was probably about midway through my high school career that I realized that you could even multiply those forces that you bring to the table with your preparation through analysis. And so as I got into college, that was another kind of feeding the fire, fanning the flames of the analysis side of the house. And so as you get into coaching, that was what the human chess piece element to it, where you are playing that high end level of chess with the guy across the field and countering his moves. And yeah, he may have a bigger, stronger guy, but my guy might be a little bit better prepared, might have a better analytical understanding of what's going to happen. And when we get in a certain formation and they're in a certain front, good things can happen. And so that kind of drew me in. And as I progressed early on in my coaching career, I thought it was just you had to have the Jimmies and the Joes. And then I started to understand you can have a good Jimmy and you can have a good Joe, but if your X's and O's aren't right, and if you're not putting that guy, it's not what you understand on the sidelines, it's what you can get that guy out on the field to understand. You got to be able to have your brain implanted in his brain to help him prepare and perform out there. And so I think that's the challenge that a lot of coaches don't understand. They know it all, but their coaching potential and the tools that they're using and that they're empowering their players with is they're not getting it from their brain to the player's brain. And that's the challenge. As much as my brain I can download into that player, he's going to be that much better on the field.
For sure. That was a quote that my high school coach used a lot. It's not about the Jimmies, or it's not about the X's and O's. It's about the Jimmies and the Joes. We're now getting into the data side of things. Well, if you could put Jimmy and Joe in a certain position to be successful, that's your job as a coach. So talk to me a little bit about what your week prep leading up to a game looked like in analyzing data, tendencies, putting together a game script. What did that process look like for you?
It definitely evolved over the years. It didn't start off this extensive, and as you gain more experience, this process that I'm going to tell you about, which I don't necessarily think I have an angle that anybody else does or doesn't do, but you become more adept at doing these skills, and so you can fine-tune these time processes down into a much easier bite for each week. But for me personally, it would start with grading the previous week's game. And I think that you have to understand what you're trying to accomplish in your game plan, and did your players accomplish that? And whether you win or lose, that's hopefully you win. All right, you start from that foundation. If you didn't win, was it because you didn't execute the game plan? Was it because you got out Jimmy'd and Joe'd? Was it catastrophic failures? What was the issue? So we want to start with that process and fine tune that process so that we can correct any mistakes that are easy to remove from the process. Once we do that, then we're going to jump into a in-depth film analysis. And I probably would watch the opposing film. We were pretty good about getting traded game films. That becomes a commodity in high school. I'll give you two of next week's opponents if you give me 4 of week 7 opponents, so there's a black market film exchange out there. So we would do everything we could to get as much film as we could so we could analyze as many tendencies as we possibly could. I would probably have by midseason, we would probably have every game the other team had played. So I'm watching 3 or 4, 5 games. I'm watching every game probably twice, if not 3 times, all the way through. And then I'll break it down into specific fronts that they're going to line up in. And then at some point, I'm trying to compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges, meaning we have, say, 10 formations, 15 formations that we're going to use with motions. What does the opponent's opponent, how many of those formations do they use? Can I get a good look of in all the various situations, down distances and blitz tendencies off of all those? So I'm searching, I'm mining all that information out of the film, hopefully Saturday and Sunday. This process will take, for me being basically a one-man prep crew, it would take me till Tuesday or Wednesday to do all those reps. But I had enough done on Saturday and Sunday that I could start prepping the game plan. We would come up with a game plan on Sunday. We would probably hone it down to, we tried to keep our play call sheets under 35 calls. And we got to the point where I'm talking about, if we ran, let's just say ISO to the right and ISO to the left, that's not one play, that's 2 plays for us. So when I say 35 plays, I'm talking about running a mirror image play left or right counts as 2 plays. So when you start thinking about that, now you're kind of really hemming yourself in as far as your playbook goes. But we were going to try to keep it simple and do the simple things really well. We were going to do a master of 2 or 3 things and not a jack of all trades. And so I wanted to make sure that we could run our 3 or 4 bread and butter plays left and right against whatever they were going to throw up against us and whatever blitz. And I would try to put our guys into the game situations that they were going to see as many times as I could, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, so that they would, on Friday, hopefully based on the conditioning, the demands we were giving them, how hard and tough our practices were, how physical they were, Friday was going to be a breeze compared to a Wednesday, which we always considered game speed. Wednesday was game speed. We'd always play the game Wednesday. In our scout periods and our special teams periods and our individual periods, we had music going, there was distractions, you had to focus in. Coaches had to communicate over the din of noise that was going on. And so we tried to replicate a Friday night situation Wednesday afternoons as often as possible. And then as an offensive coordinator, you look at on a scout team situation, if you're going to have a scout period, and for us, we 2 platoons. So we had 22 offensive guys and 22 defensive guys, and we were doing our own thing, and we would come together and scout for one another. But for the most part, if you're doing it that way, you got to figure you're going to have about 100 to 110 reps each week to replicate your game scenarios. And that, when you start talking about you have 110 reps over 3 days, now you have this sense of urgency, because how many times do you want to run your bread and butter against whatever 3 or 4 or 5 different fronts they're going to show you? And you don't want to do that just once. You want to do that 2, 3, or 4 times. So if you take your 4 best plays and you want to run it to the right and you want to run it to the left, that's actually 8 plays for us. You've just taken up 1/10 of your scout time just running your bread and butter right and left. Now, if they have 2 or 3 different fronts with 2 or 3 different blitzes, now you've got into 8 times 3, which is 24, times 2, which is 50 plays right there, just running your bread and butter left and right against their fronts and their blitzes. That doesn't leave a whole lot. And so now you only have 60 plays for your pass game, your screen game, your whatever it is, special plays, whatever it is. So now, as an offensive coordinator, as an offensive coordinator, I was always tempted to put more in, but we got to the point where if we were putting a play in, we took a play out. And it's just like if you go shopping, you buy a new shirt, you go to the closet, take the old shirt out, put the new shirt in, because you can't. Those guys aren't the guys out on the field. It doesn't matter how much. Again, going back to, it doesn't matter how much I know. It's what can I get my center, my right guard, my tight end, the quarterback. What can I get them to know? Because it doesn't help us. It doesn't do us any good. You go back to, I think it was 2017. We're playing Miami Northwestern over in Travis Powell Stadium, and they got the number 1 rated corner in the country and the number 2 rated corner in the country lining up on defense against us. And we ran a counter, and our running back, who went to Clemson, Ches Malusi, runs an 80-yard touchdown play. We come back the next series, call the exact same play, and our quarterback gets confused and opens up the wrong way. This is the 14th week of the season, and he opens the wrong way. Sure enough, everybody blocks their assignments. The lane opens up just like it did the first series, and we get sacked for -6 because he turned the wrong way. Doesn't matter what we know. Our quarterback didn't know which way to turn on counter. It was the same play we just ran an 80-yard touchdown for, and he got confused. So you You can't put 10 pounds of flour in a 5-pound sack with these guys. And a lot of coaches make that mistake. But through analysis and limiting the amount of reps that you're going to be able to do in a week, you just got to be really good at something. And then when you show up Friday night, if the 6 things you practiced all week don't work, having 8 things isn't going to make you win. Like, you just got to buck up and take your beating, because that's what's going to happen. They're better than you that night. They prep better, or they're better guys, whatever it is. But if your 6 things you did 110 times for 3 days doesn't work, you're not going to pull something out of your left field on Friday night to win. It's just not going to happen.
And adding something maybe complex or intricate from a coaching perspective, maybe you know it, but how are you communicating it to Jimmy and Joe? And I really like what you said there of how if you were putting in a play, you're taking something out. From a player's perspective, it's almost like having a bunch of open screens on a computer. You're just piling all these screens, and while you're not using them, they're still taking up space. They're still taking up power. So coach being able to come in and simplify things. One of my favorite quotes from Tony Robbins is, "Complexity is the enemy of execution." Right? Keep it simple and go out and execute. So
a thinking player is a slow player.
That's right. So over your 2 decades coaching and playing, there was kind of a shift. I played high school football up in New York, but I think it really just had to do with football. Like in the year of maybe like 2005 to 2010, you started seeing more offenses go to a spread philosophy and an air raid, a West Coast, on the ball, huddling. How was that transition, seeing that from a player and then a coach? What was that transition like into a new, almost era of offense?
Yeah, I agree that's as the proliferation of offense attacks go through the NHL or NFL and filter its way down into the high school ranks, you find yourself seeing all these various things, and you want to dabble in that, because you're like, I could open this up. The discipline for us was, we were a running team. For us, we had to stay disciplined. We didn't have, I think if you're going to get in a spread formation, you got to have 4 or 5 guys and catch a football. You got to have a dude that can make a decision in 3 steps, 4 steps, and decide what the formation is and get it to him. We just weren't having that talent flow come through. And so our desire was, we were big in the weight room, and we're going to take our top 33 guys. We figured you're going to have about 33 guys on a high school program get on the field on a Friday night in a 2-platoon situation. Backups, whatever it is, they're going to be some sort of combination of those 33 guys. Our goal, you might have the top 3 strongest guys on the field. Our goal is to be 4 through 33 stronger than you were from your 4 to 33. And typically that really was how it was. So we were taking our 2-star athletes, putting them in a lifting program, lifting 48 weeks a year for 4 years. And by the time they're seniors, that 2-star, he's a 3.5, 4-star. The 4 stars are moving up towards 5. So we were upgrading our talent based on strength. That can work in those air raid situations. But for us, we just weren't seeing the talent flow. So we had to stay disciplined and do what we do. We ran a triple option offense. We run the ball for, we were in around that time, it would have been 2000, I don't know, in the late 2008, 7, 8, 9, 10, somewhere in that area. We led the state of Florida in rushing and points per game scored, and we threw the ball 12 times a game maybe. So we weren't getting involved in all that kind of stuff. It really put the pressure on our defense to kind of change what they were doing. But, through that, we had to replicate that in practice for them for scout teams. So we're running spread plays with our guys, but I thank God we weren't relying on that to score points, because you have a good wide receiver. Like, it seems like we'd have 2 good wide receivers and a quarterback that couldn't throw the ball 4 yards. And then we'd have a quarterback who could throw the ball 25 yards, and we didn't have anybody who could run a route for 25 yards. So, like, we never had our puzzle pieces that matched up. But and of course, the people in the stands, you need to throw the ball more, And I don't think they understand that if you go 3 and out, now your defense is on the field more. They're getting more tired. They're making them open up to more plays. And so you're getting in a situation where if you can replicate that talent year in and year out, it's a good move. But if you can't, how do you generate a wide receiver that can go deep, or a quarterback that can put the ball on a dart to the wideout? And so that's hard to do. And if you struggle doing that, like a lot of teams around here have, they're not going to be very successful. I mean, it's it's crazy to see that, but it is impressive when you see those teams that can do it well. The Miami Northwesterns, the Miami Centrals, the Miami Jackson schools, they line up and do that, and they sling it around, and they never get under center, and they seldom huddle, and they're hurry up offense, and it puts a lot of pressure on the team to, our coach said for his spring game, he's like, we need to be able to punt because we're playing against a lot of big dudes, and that might be our best offensive play is the punt. So let's make sure we get the snap back there and we can block and get the punt off. That way, at least it'll lengthen the game a little bit. And sometimes you got to tip your hat to the other side and say, you're better than us, all facets of the game. And if you can sling it around and get the talent to come through there every year that you can continue to do that, it's a pretty formidable opponent to see that coming in week in.
For sure. That's awesome. So now if we zero in a little bit on a specific position group that's close to your heart and what you have a natural skill set in, and being able to identify quickly positives and negatives from an offensive line perspective. I think it came from you just have a natural skill for it, but also you've been honing that skill for the past over 2 decades now. Talk to me a little bit about how you sharpened that sword over the past 2 decades. And when it comes to the offensive line play, what are you really looking for, and how do you know if hey, we're winning the job up front or we need to pivot to something? What kind of drives that? What are you looking for on the field?
Yeah, the offensive line, that's the hardest. I think it's the hardest position to coach. You have 6 dudes on the field at one time. So to be able to monitor 6 guys is tough. I think that you can train your eyes to see groups. And I think that through film study and just, I graded every rep our guys took during the game on Friday night. So we'd have 50, 60, 70 plays. Well, that's, you get 70 plays, that's 350 grades you're given. And so I wanted the guys to know whether they did their job and if they did their job well. So that's the feedback they're getting. I also graded every rep my offensive line took in practice Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And they got a grade sheet from me before we watched film. So Monday we'd go to practice. We'd have 25 or 30 plays on a Monday scout session. They got a grading report from me with every play watched by me and graded every single day of the week, my entire career. Couple things for that. One, I'm able to monitor, is that guy able to do his job? If he's consistently grading out at 55, 60% during a week, he's not beating the sophomore scout team guy. He's not going to beat the senior on the other team. I need to look at another alternative, or we need to consider that when we're calling plays that this guy, anything that relies this guy to do his job, we can't, it's not a given. So I'm kind of gauging what each position is going to do and be able to do. And then once you get in the game, you don't really know. You think you have an idea what the other guy on the other side is going to be able to do, what his talent levels are, how strong, how fast he is. But when you get into the game, sometimes your evaluations on film are better than what they were or worse than what they were. And so having an idea of how my guys did each week and what my expectations were going into that, I can kind of fine tune what I think that guy can do against that talent that I've seen at eyewitness account. So I'm grading each week, and I want to see my guys pushing, starting in maybe in the low 70s, high 60s at the beginning of the week, and pushing towards 80% towards the end of the week, because it's all new. They played Friday night. We practiced a little bit on Saturday with lifting and running and conditioning, watching film, but we didn't do anything football wise. So our guys were off mentally from football Saturday, most of the day Saturday, all day Sunday, went through school all day Monday. So it'd been 2.5 days since they'd really thought about football. So we introduced a game plan. I'm not expecting them to understand and be able to execute a game plan Monday after listening to it for an hour in the classroom and then go out on the field. So I wanted to see some semblance. I wanted to see them be able to move. I wanted to be able to see them remember the schemes from the previous weeks that we talked about. So as we got better through the week and we're able to replicate those situations longer and more and individual, everything was structured to the scout period, which was structured to the game time on Friday. So I'm doing my individual time. If we have a scheme that requires double teams and getting off to the next level, that was my individual period. We worked that until I got it right. We didn't go on Tuesday to the next thing. I didn't do another drill until that drill was right, because if we can't do that scheme in individual and the guy in individual doesn't know when to come off the block, he's not going to get better on Tuesday. There's not a natural progression of, they just naturally get better. They stink. They're going to stink all week. They're going to stink on Friday night, and you're going to stink Saturday when you watch the film. So each day eliminating one thing for each player that they're doing wrong or that they can improve on. I wasn't giving them 7 things to do. One thing, you need to step with your right foot at that target better. When that right foot step's going, okay, maybe there's another mistake down the road we can do, but until that's fixed, it doesn't matter to go forward. Years ago, I went to a clinic out in Colorado, a football clinic, I said, Coach, take me through how you teach this was a college. I said, take me through how you teach your offensive linemen. And like, I'm a freshman coming into your program. Teach me how you would teach your guys. And so he stands me up down the front. We're in a big lecture hall. It's just me and him. And he takes me, he puts me in a fit and then says, okay, this is the fit. This is what I want it to feel like when you get, I go, wait a second, time out, Coach. You start teaching from the fit? I said, there's 28 things to do before you get to the fit. What if they don't have the right stance, right step, right pad level, right eye placement, right hand? They're never going to make it to the fit. You're teaching like it blew my mind. I immediately walked out of the room. I'm like, I can't talk to this guy anymore because it was so, now it worked for him. It didn't work for me. I can't go from the back and work. I can go from the front and work backwards. I got to work from the foundation up. And so I'm trying to do that each drill, each practice, each week. I'm looking for aggressiveness. I'm looking for toughness. I'm looking for, they don't have to be the strongest guy. We won state championships. We beat a team out of Tampa in 2001 for a state championship, and I think they had 4 guys playing NFL on their defense. We had 2 guys play college football on our offense. And so there was, it was not, if you lined our team up against their team, you would pick their team 100 out of 100 times. But our guys knew what they were supposed to do. They were fearless. In fact, our starting right guard on that team coach is with us now, and he looked at me one day and he goes, "You lied to me." I said, "When did I lie to you?" "I don't lie to you." "When did I lie to you?" He said, "You lied to me in that state championship game." I said, "What are you talking about? I didn't lie to you. I told you the truth the whole time." He goes, "No, you said we could win." I said, "We did win." He goes, "Yeah, but you said we belonged out there, and we did not belong out there, Coach. Those guys were monsters." And I chuckled. He was right. I was probably lying to him the whole time about being able to do that. But, I want a guy he was 185 pounds blocking the guy who was Broderick Bunkley, who started Florida State and went on to be a top 10 draft pick for the New York Giants or Jets, whoever it was. And this kid never played college football, weighed 185 pounds with a roll of quarters in his pocket. And he blocked Broderick Bunkley the whole game. And so tenacity, physical, aggressiveness, willing to, ignore pain. We tell the same guy that said he lied to me. He came to me and goes, "Coach, my hand, I think I hurt my hand." And I said, "Let me see it." And he held his hand up in front of me. I said, "Where's it hurt?" And he points at it right there. And I go, whack, and I slapped it. I said, "Does it still hurt?" And he goes, "Nope, feels great." And so that's kind of cruel, but that's kind of the ignore it. Like, I don't have anybody to put in a game for you. Like, we had 5 offensive linemen that year. So I said, "Let me see your other hand." He goes, No, I'm good. I'm good." He left. We never talked about his hurt thumb ever again. It was probably broken, and he got it fixed later on. But at that point in time, we didn't, I laugh about it. We laugh about it now. But he's like, "You slapped my hurt hand." I go, "Well, you didn't worry about it anymore, did you?" He goes, "No." I said, "Well, see, I'm Mr. Miyagi. I fixed it all."
That's what it's like living in the trenches, and for listeners that maybe don't even know what the trenches is the offensive line and D-line play. And going back to what you said about the stances and starts, when I was in the Army and I was volunteering, coaching high school football, one of the things before the games that I really looked for on the sidelines is during warm-ups what the stances and starts look like. Like, what is the fundamental? And if there was a team that had solid stances and starts, they're coming out low, they have perfect technique right from the jump, we knew that they could play. But if they had, coaches didn't really care, coming out slow, flat-footed, not great stances, no coaching, just from right before the ball is hiked, you knew that, hey, we got an edge on these guys because we coach those fundamentals. So what's one of the things that maybe if for someone that doesn't know the trenches, doesn't know those stance and starts, doesn't really know what it's like to be O-line, D-line, and when watching the game, it's almost a shame because how important those trenches are to winning the football game. When you watch it, I'm sure there's a certain lens that you have that you're looking at in the offensive line, defensive line. What's maybe one thing that you would tell a fan that doesn't really look at the offensive line, defensive line, they're just following the ball? What's one thing that you could tell them to maybe look at to maybe get a better sense of what's going on up front?
I think I'm going to use the word leverage and then tell you what it means to me and how we use it on the football field. The leverage for an offensive lineman, there's a number of different kinds of leverage. There's leverage as an individual, whether you're lower, if you're pad level, if you can put the brim of your helmet under their chin, that's leverage. All right. And I'm not talking about leverage in this situation in that regard. That type of leverage will help you move the guy out of the way. That leverage will help you push him where he doesn't want to go and where you want him to go. The art of blocking, and when you can do that effectively over the period of time, you're going to knock the guy down. You're going to have a pancake, or we call it an eagle block, and those are impressive for offensive linemen to be able to do that. The leverage I'm referring to is helmet leverage, and so as an offensive lineman, if you imagine, let's say each helmet is a dot, okay, on the field as you're watching it. And so as an offensive lineman, I want to keep my helmet or my dot in between the defensive lineman's helmet dot and the football, which would be a dot. So that leverage, keeping my body in between the defensive lineman and the football, is something that each offensive lineman at the start of each play is doing his darndest to achieve. And so if you can watch the helmets and the helmet of the offensive lineman stays between the football and the defensive lineman, that's going to be a successful play. If the defensive lineman's helmet, his dot is even or level with the offensive lineman, it's not going to be successful. And then as this progresses, if your defensive line helmet dot is between the football and the offensive lineman's head, then that's going to be catastrophic failure right away. Very short yardage gain, if any at all. And so that leverage aspect is something that you can watch. And, assuming that the different color helmets are there, it's kind of easy to watch the leverage helmets, the leverage point of the helmets as they go through a play. And you'll be able to determine pretty quickly, okay, that guy won that play because his helmet stayed in front of the football. And that's an easy thing I think you can look at pretty quick throughout a play and make a snap decision on.
Yeah. Let's shift real quick to fantasy football on the topic of offensive line. Offensive line is basically invisible to the fantasy football world. No points, no drafts, nothing. And, one of this week's stat of the week from last year, the 2024 NFL season, 7 of the top 10 fantasy football running backs played behind an offensive line that was ranked in the top 12 by Pro Football Focus. So it still kind of shocks me that someone has not figured out a way to incorporate one of the most important positions into the game of fantasy football. I guess I can kind of see why it's hard to grade, but why do you think someone hasn't figured that out yet?
It's not sexy. Nobody, they have sacks. You get points for sacks. They recognize the individual defensive line or the unit for a sack, but they don't, you get to play a defense. You get to start a defense each week on fantasy football, but you don't get started on offense. I think you probably could adjust that. Give them a yards per game, yards per rush category, and give them a 1/10 of a point for every average yards per rush. That now all of a sudden you need to start looking. That's going to make you look at stats, because there are some offensive lines out there they're sneaky too. You might not necessarily think it might not even be a team that's successful, but they run the ball really well, but their defense stinks, or they run it, but they throw it more often than they run it. But when they run it, they're not suspecting it. So I think that would be a good stat to add in there for a fantasy football league. Yards per carry, and you get whatever. Take your points, regular pointage, or multiply it by a 1/10 to see. But I think if you're going to recognize the defense for shutouts or whatever, you should recognize the offense, because that defensive number is kind of I guess it's everybody. Interceptions, sacks, fumbles, that kind of thing. So I think there should be some sort of recognition. Those poor guys, man, they get their hands smashed and they're in ice baths all week. Their body just starts to, everyone's like, oh, that quarterback got hit hard. Well, he got hit hard 3 times in the whole game. The center got hit hard 73 times the whole game. They just start to feel better, and then it's game time for the next week, and they just spend the whole season in an ice bath.
Yeah. I was listening to one of the top draft picks this year. I think it was the guy that came out of LSU. He was like, if a D lineman has 12 sacks or gets 12 sacks out of the year, he's a first-round draft pick. If I allow 12 sacks, you're not talking to me right. You don't know who I am. I'm off the team. So, the percentage of wins is like wins per play is so like out of proportion. And it's understandable why, but it's so out of proportion that there's got to be a way to show the offensive line some love, especially now when you watch ESPN and a lot of the talking hosts now, like a Jason Kelsey, you're starting to see more personality come out of the offensive line. And there's no reason why. Yeah, they're not. It's like, and put that into the game. I really hope that one day we see that.
You could do a sacks per, sacks allowed per 10 attempts. For every 10 attempts passing attempted, no sacks given, you earn whatever sack would be. I don't know, whatever sack's worth a point usually. I don't know, 3 points or whatever. Give them the equivalent to not sacks.
Start them at just like defense. Start them at 15 points. Drop them if they, drop them if they get a sack. A rushing touchdown is like +3. Something. It's not even like you got to do a unique grading system or come up with like points per reception. You could just do it based off of the offensive snaps, just like you do defense.
Yeah, the numbers are already there. They already have all those numbers calculated. That would be easy. Gosh, yeah, that would be nice. They get no love. It's sad. It's sad. It's a sad thing. But that's why most of the guys are nuts. They just entertain themselves and are happy to stay in their little five-man posse over there in the corner of the field and make fun of each other and call each other fat, and that's about
fat man.
Yeah, it's probably universal across all levels.
Yeah, and there's a certain pride in that, right? There's a certain pride of being a fat man. Like,
there's 5 middle school kids over across the street to middle school practice that are talking the same things that the 5 Buffalo Bill offensive linemen are talking about. The same. It just hasn't. It's bigger toys and more food. That's the only difference.
Oh, that's funny. So now, we're talking about the offensive line and grading. That's something that you've been away from the game coaching for 2 years now. Is that right?
Yes.
And now you're kind of starting to come into wanting to be around the game again. And that's very similar to me. When I got out of the Army, I wanted to be involved in sports again. I wanted to take my skill set of data, apply it to sports so I could just be in the game again. I think that's very similar to what you're doing. It's very inspiring to see that, hey, you have this unique skill of being able to watch offensive line play and grade offensive line play, and now you're trying to be back in the game again by providing coaches that something that's not there, and that's something that's super important. Talk to me a little bit about what that journey has been like, being away from the game and now wanting to come back in a new unique role.
Yeah, so when I watch games, it's a study. It's not I enjoy watching football, but I'm watching football and I'm gleaning skills, techniques, gameplays, how, like, I'm evaluating offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, how, like, it's always just, it's input, it's data that's coming into my brain. I say data, air quote the data there. I'm not like quantifying any of that kind of stuff. It's just feelings, and it kind of goes into the gut. And so as I was watching some of these, I've been able to watch more, which, for example, we go back to 2000 and I don't remember what year it was, maybe 6, 7, 8, one of our state championship runs. We were playing Miami Edison, and I was watching the New England Patriots game, and they ran a play where they were in a bear defense, and they had Sam coverage on the tight end, and the New England Patriots left tackle blocked the guy on a run block that was supposed to be Sam coverage on the tight end, and the tight end just did a little fold step behind the tackle and ran a go right up the middle of the field. So the guy that's supposed to be in man coverage with the tight end just got run blocked by the left tackle, which is completely legal, completely illegal at the same time, and goes unnoticed because it happens up in the trenches that very few people pay attention to. So here's this tight end running smack down in the middle of the field, catches a touchdown pass because the left tackle blocked the guy that was supposed to cover him on the line of scrimmage. Fast forward 3 weeks later, we're coming into the state, I think it was a state semifinal game if I remember correctly. We're playing Miami Edison. They run a bear defense. They're in Sam coverage. And I said, I think I got something that we can work in here. And sure enough, we do the exact same play. Exact same thing happens. Nobody's covering our tight end, runs straight down the middle field, touchdown pass on, and I think at that point we went up 14 or 21-0. They fumbled the ball early, we blocked the kick early, and next thing you know, we're up 21-0 on 3 possessions, and there's still 8 minutes left in the first quarter, and it just took the wind out of their sails, and we probably had no business being on the field. Those guys, they were very, very athletic, very strong, very fast, very well coached, but from that one particular game, I picked that up watching an NFL game and was able to steal it, and thanks Coach Belichick for doing that for us and getting us to the state finals that year. And so as I'm watching more, I'm trying to quantify how these experiences, this wisdom, gives you a gut sensation, but I wanted to have something to quantify it with. So that kind of started me on this journey where I started experimenting with some abilities and software packages to measure, I don't know what you want to call it, but a heat map that measures how guys are performing. And so I'm in the process of developing this right now, and it's an in-game capacity to tell people what their trends are in the offensive line. It's real time, and it helps guys be able to make decisions on what plays would be good or what plays would be bad based on the performance that's happening on the field, and a way to track it and a way to quickly look at it on the sidelines and be able to use that information to help you be a better coach.
For sure. And it's so fitting with the latest technology rules now, especially at high school football, where you're allowed to have technology on the side. And there's probably a lot of coaches out there that might hear what you just said and be like, oh, I don't need it. I go off of gut. I know what I'm seeing. But if you're playing an opponent now that is leveraging the new rules, has a good technology, and has the data now to where you can go into halftime, go into the fourth quarter, and look at a heat map, like you just said, of where his offensive line is performing, that's a significant advantage than someone just going off of that gut feeling. So I think it's super interesting what you're bringing to the table and what you're formulating right now, especially with the rule changes. Have you heard of the company called Go Route? They have like these little iPhones, where you put your play card on your thing.
Oh, yes.
They show you the play.
Yes.
Right. And I think their next, like, why one of their motivations for doing that is for cheating, because you can't watch a play signal. You can just send it through. So the technology, being able to adapt to that as a coaching style, being able to adapt with the new times and get kind of that advantage over your opponent, because just like we said in the beginning, it's a chess move. And if you can kind of predict what your next opponent is doing and not just off of a gut feeling, you're going to win that chess game. You're more often to win that chess game than not if you're using data and your opponent's not.
Because there are times where my gut was telling me, we're dominating this kid. We're dominating this kid. And I go and watch the film, and I'm like, I just saw I watched him twice, and those were the only two plays he won the entire game. And so here I am basing my information on a gut, which was accurate based on those couple times that I saw it. But you're watching six guys as an offensive coordinator. I'm watching the running back, make sure he's going the right way. The quarterback's making the right reads. So I'm not catching everything all the time, but I'm taking snapshots here and there in my mind. And if I'm making decisions based on bad snapshot information because I don't have an accurate picture of what actually is happening, then my gut's wrong. It's been wrong many times where I go back and I watch the film and I'm like, we had a kid, this is 4 or 5 years ago, we're playing in a district competition, a district champion or a district rival team, and the kid, we're not moving the ball at all. We're just struggling. And my right tackle keeps saying, I got a baby. And I was like, oh man, he got some girl pregnant. What in the world is going on? Why is he telling me on Friday night in the middle of the game? So at halftime, I finally, he goes, I got a baby. I go, even said, what does that mean? You got a baby? He goes, I got a baby on me, coach. I can do whatever I want with this kid. Well, because we were struggling, I wasn't paying attention. We weren't running behind this kid. And he was telling me the whole first half, I got a baby. I thought he was having a baby with some little girl and that he was going to be a daddy, and that terrified me. But
tell me that on Sunday, not right now.
Exactly, not Friday night. Turn to find out, that's his way of saying, I can take this kid wherever I want to, run behind me. Sure enough, second half, I go, run it behind Evenson. He's got the baby on him. And sure enough, we came out in the second half and scored 2 or 3 touchdowns and ran behind Evenson because I just didn't, my gut was telling me this kid's getting ready to have, bad communication on my part, but my gut also was telling me run the other way because that other kid looks like he's doing better, and I was completely wrong. So had I had this information and I was tracking trends, I would have seen this guy, he's super green and the guy on the other side is super red. I don't go to the green, not the red. It's pretty simple.
So what would you say to a coach out there that is maybe stuck in the old ways of that gut feeling? How would you coach him up on changing to more of an analytical data approach, and how do you merge those two to have an instinct and a backstop of something that you can look at like a heat map?
Yeah, I think it can confirm your instincts and disprove your instincts. And so, you got to adapt. Things are getting different. Like, kids learn different nowadays. They have iPhones. You can watch the film on their iPhones. Like our guys, we'd put practice film up. As soon as our practice film went up, they didn't learn anything the rest of the day. they come to me by third period. Hey, did you see play 6? And I'm like, my planning period is not till the end of the day. I haven't graded anything yet, but they've already watched the film 2 or 3 times. They've already seen what they've done wrong. And so take advantage of that. Why not let the kid expand his football knowledge and his experience and be his own? Like, if I could put 11 coaches on the field behind each kid, we're going to be really good out there each play. Why not make each kid his own coach? And we kind of train them up to do that by giving them access to the information, having them see what we see and hear what's the voice inside our head as they're watching the film. And I give that to them each day. And now all of a sudden they see themselves doing something. I always told them on the field, I'm giving you tools for your toolbox. I don't know which one of these tools you're going to use Friday night. I don't know if you're going to be able to run block this guy, chop block this guy, cut block this guy, whatever it is. Here's 6 different ways to skin the cat. One of them's got to work Friday night. Figure it out which one it is. So he comes back to the huddle. I said, if you're getting knocked backwards, you're taking too long a first step. Shorten your first step. Come back to the huddle. Man, I just got blown up. Then the guy next to you should say, did you take a too long step? Like, those are conversations that our offensive linemen have on the field in the huddle, not on the sidelines. They come to the sidelines and like, coach, that guy's in the shade. We can't do it this way. We're going to do it that way. It works better. We did it on the last play. It worked. People are like, you guys do such great second half, adjustments, and you guys come out in the second half. It's like a different team. What do you do in the halftime? I listen to what my guys tell me during the first half, and I try to do more of what they say that works for them on the field in the second half than we did in the first half. It's all about a puzzle, like a football game. As a coach, as an offensive coordinator, I always thought of it as a puzzle. Like, you dump out the pieces at the beginning of the game and you try to put that picture together, and the person who gets the picture put together fastest by the coaches is going to win the game. And so you got to get the sides out. You got to figure out what your parameters are, what your left and right parameters are, your front and back parameters, and then you can start putting that puzzle piece together. The quicker you get those borders out and put together, the better off you're going to be, because the picture comes into focus much easier. If you struggle putting the border pieces together, it's going to be a long night, and hopefully you get it figured out by the end of the fourth quarter. If not, then you're not going to be successful. So as a coach who's stuck in his old ways, do you want to win? Do you want to be successful? There's, you can win a lot of games and do it the old way. But if you're not winning the most important game because the other team is, or you're trusting your gut and your gut's wrong in that one game, I don't know. I'm arrogant in that I want to win.
Yeah.
But as soon as you win that state championship game, the next day you got to wake up. You're 5 weeks behind everybody else in the state because they had 5 weeks of practice. So my mindset, I want to get there. I want to win. As soon as I won, the next day I woke up, I'm like, okay, great. We're behind. We got to get going.
Yeah. Lane Kiffin just told a great story about Nick Saban when he was his offensive coordinator. He was like, yeah, Nick Saban, the next day we had a 7 a.m. staff meeting because we're a month behind. Everyone had the last month recruiting. Like, they didn't even get to celebrate that night. It's on to the next year. What's the data say on the recruits? How do we go get them? Which was crazy to think about. But then he was like, that's why he is Nick Saban. Like, that's just why. I think another important part of coaching people through not that data, being able to communicate with the data, I think is very important. When you're on a staff and you're trying to communicate gut feelings just through word of mouth, it's very hard to articulate that gut feeling, especially if you're a younger coach, a newer coach, maybe bringing new ideas to the offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, or just being able to communicate as a staff. It's really hard to articulate those gut feelings and, hey, I think this guy, I saw this guy. But being able to pair that with actual data and tendencies and being able to point at a chart, be like, no, this is what I'm seeing it, but this is the data to support it, and this is what I think that we should do. Those two conversations are so much night and day. If you're going to have that data, if you can have the skill set I think it's a really skill set that people need to have. When they're not data focused, that means they don't really have the skill set of being able to take a data set, drill into it, use it. And in today's day and age, it's just something that you got to have. And that's wise because you're able to communicate at a high level. You're able to now get those recommendations, maybe approved that much faster. The other coaches are looking at you like, damn, this guy, yeah, I agree. I saw that same thing too because I could see it on the board and on those dashboards. Something that I think I think the times are changing. I think more coaches are starting to realize it as a younger generation comes through, and the older generation is starting to see the power of it. And I think that the coaches that are still coaching today, probably I've realized that, and that's why they're still coaching, is because they have all of that experience, plus now the data to back that up and take them that much further.
I mean, why wouldn't you embrace something that makes you better? And especially if everybody else is doing it, why not? I mean, to not take a step into that direction, you're just being stubborn, and there's no reason for that. I think that, and then at some point, as a young coach, I would give the young coach this advice too. Sometimes you got to show up and just lose a game. Like, there are many times where I'm like, I did not like what we were doing. I didn't agree with it, but I was the offensive coordinator, but I wasn't the buck didn't stop with me. So the decisions that were made, I didn't like it. I didn't like what we were doing. I didn't like how we're preparing. I didn't like the call, whatever it was. And at some point, I just got to say, okay, here we go. And not be the one that comes in afterwards and say, I told you so. Also, like, that's a skill set. Like, you have to develop that ability to defer to the authority and then not tell the authority that you were right. Like, let your decisions and your evidence that you provided up front, if you're pointing at this thing saying, this guy's not playing well, we don't want to run behind him, and then you run behind him and you don't get the first down and then you lose the game, you don't have to say anything. That's made its own point. You don't have to do that. So I think that's a tough thing to do as a young coach, but you also, young coaches aren't young coaches their entire life. Eventually, young coaches turn into experienced and older coaches. So that's part of your process of going through that. And, I coach with some bad coaches. I learned what not to do sometimes over what to do, and one of the you can't help me lose a game. I can do that myself, and don't let the players hold you hostage. Those are things I learned early on. Like, you got your best player on the field and he does something stupid or in the classroom, he's going to miss a game, and that hurts everybody. But sometimes you got to lose a game.
Yeah, sometimes that's the best form of change right there. Best form of change.
People understand that. People understand losing games.
Well, that's good stuff. Coach Horn, I really appreciate you coming on here, man. This is really what the show is all about, being able to show the fans a version of the game that they might not see, and also showing them that, hey, being able to combine your passion to get into the game in another way, more than just a fan, more than just a player, more than just a coach, I think is really inspiring to see. And I appreciate you coming on here and sharing that journey for us. Listeners, if you don't already follow him on X, go ahead and follow him at The Trench Doctor. Keep an eye out for what he's building. I think it's going to be something truly special that coaches are going to rely on in-game to make those key decisions and really crush their opponent for not having that. Hey, be sure to subscribe to the Fan Day Nation so you don't miss out on future episodes as we continue to go behind the scenes and explore the heart of the game. Coach, any last words?
That's awesome. No, thank you so much, Danny. I appreciate you and Recon for having me on, and it's always fun to talk football.
Absolutely.
At any level, for sure.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Well, hey, thanks, and we'll see you next time.